Hi everyone, I'm here today to discuss how legislation is shaping the future of domestic heating. So we all know that climate change is a very real challenge facing today's society and it affects every area of the planet. We know that action is required to make changes that will safeguard the future of our planet across many different industries and sectors, and this includes domestic heating and hot water. So now I'm going to speak through a timeline of reports, policy, strategy and recommendations to show the journey so far that has informed our product portfolio and what this means for the future of domestic heating appliances. In 2008, the UK government introduced the UK Climate Change Act, legislating for an 80% reduction in carbon emissions from the 1990 levels by 2050. If we move forwards to 2015, and at the Paris Climate Change Summit, the leaders of 196 countries adopted the Paris Agreement. And here they committed to limit global temperature increases through a reduction in carbon emissions. If we fast forward again to February 2019, the Committee for Climate Change, an independent advisory body to the government, released a report focused on the impact of domestic dwellings on carbon emissions entitled UK Housing Fit for the Future. So in this report, the Committee for Climate Change identified that energy use in homes accounts for approximately 14% of UK greenhouse gas emissions, and that a near total decarbonisation of the UK housing stock is required to hit carbon emission targets. The report identified 5 key areas where urgent change is required. Number 1 was performance and compliance, so closing the gap of as designed versus as built performance, which means really ensuring that the house's energy efficiency is the same in real life as it is on paper. Number 2 was the skills gap. A significant skills gap currently exists between the level of ambition for low carbon heating in this country and the installer base trained to fit it. Number 3 was the retrofitting of existing homes. Strategy and policy is needed to increase the take-up of energy efficiency measures in existing properties. Number 4 was new homes. Now this report really identified the new homes are really the low-hanging fruit when it comes to implementing low-carbon heating, and it recommended that by 2025, no new homes should be connected to the gas grid. What we saw following this report was that in his spring statement, the Chancellor Philip Hammond committed to developing a future home standard for the new build, which included the removal of fossil fuels by 2025. The 5th area identified was finance and funding to enable the changes needed to occur. In May 2019, the Committee for Climate Change released another report, a net zero report. Here they concluded that they believed that the UK could achieve net zero by 2050 if action and radical policy started immediately. Now, net zero is a more ambitious target than that original 80% reduction in carbon emissions. It means 100% reduction in the UK's carbon emissions from 1990 levels by 2050. Following the publication of this report and these recommendations, the Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, in her last few days in office, legislated for net zero. This means that the UK is now legally bound to achieving net zero by 2050. And Scotland, on top of this, has committed to reach net zero by 2045. So if we move forward to November 2020, the UK government published their 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. This was badged as part of the post-COVID recovery package, and this plan starts to outline how net zero will be achieved, covering many different areas, including transport, industry, homes and buildings. The 10-point plan demonstrates the clear ambition and direction of travel for the decarbonisation of UK homes, whilst keeping an open door as to the type of technology pathway pursued. Firstly, addressing the source of the energy, There is backing for the upscaling of offshore wind, the increase in the capacity of low-carbon hydrogen generation, and the advancement of clean nuclear power. In the plan, there is an aim to have the first town heated entirely by hydrogen by the end of the decade, and also the ambition to be installing 600,000 heat pumps per year by 2028. The 10-point plan commits £12 billion of government investment in green tech, which is anticipated to drive over 250,000 jobs and also significant investment from the private sector. In December 2020, the UK government released their energy white paper entitled Powering Our Way to a Net Zero Future. This really built on the contents of the 10-point plan. Again, this paper demonstrates the clear ambition for the decarbonisation of domestic heating, and it discusses how improvements to buildings could be driven through EPC targets where cost-effective and affordable, an extension of funding such as eco and the warm homes discount, and also, in the longer term, it commits to a consultation on the role of hydrogen-ready appliances and an evaluation of hydrogen as an option for domestic heating. There's a commitment to develop a strategy for upskilling of the workforce, and again, that number appears the ambition to grow heat pump installations to 600,000 per year by 2028. In December 2020, the Committee for Climate Change, that advisory body to the government, released their 6th carbon budget. Here, they make recommendations for government policy and targets throughout the 2030s that will enable us to reach those carbon emissions targets. So again, now we are back to recommendations by the Committee for Climate Change. But we know that in the past, these recommendations have been closely followed by the UK government. The 6th carbon budget recommends a milestone target on the way to net zero of a 78% reduction in carbon emissions by 2035. And that's actually a milestone that was later legislated for in early 2021. Other recommendations in the 6th carbon budget include preparation for the potential rollout of hydrogen by imposing what's classed as a no-regrets policy of boilers that are hydrogen ready, potentially by 2025. They also recommend the phase-out of oil and LPG in the late 2020s, a really ambitious target of 1 million heat pumps installed per year by 2030, and the phase-out of natural gas and the conversion of the gas grid to hydrogen during the 2030s. So, going forwards, what do we actually see? What is this going to look like? Now, the UK government have milestone targets of a 68% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, and then the recently instated 78% reduction by 2035. 2021 will see the publication of significant strategy documents and consultation on key policy, as well as the COP26 Climate Change Summit in November in Glasgow. So 2021 is going to prove to be a pivotal year for the UK heating industry, as the stage is set for the decarbonisation of UK housing stock over the coming years. The heat and building strategy and the hydrogen strategy will set out the route that the UK will take to decarbonise its housing stock, an activity that will eventually impact all households. A combination of legislation, targets, funding pathways and incentives all need to combine in a clear strategic plan to drive the change required at scale. COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021, 6 years after the Paris climate change meeting, is one of the largest gatherings of world leaders which will focus particularly on the challenge of climate change. So what we will see now is a combination of government strategy, policy and funding combining to drive towards net zero. New build properties driven to increase energy efficiency and decrease carbon emissions through building regulations known as Part L. Firstly, through the interim Part L in 2022, and then the Future Homes Standard in 2025. Social housing, heavily influenced by local government targets, sees its new build programmes similarly driven by Part L, and then existing properties decarbonised through a combination of targeted funding pathways and EPC targets. private retrofit will undoubtedly transition slightly later, with robust funding and targets needing to be clearly defined and communicated. So what does all of this mean for our homes and the way that we heat them? It means a diversification of products and technologies that will provide heating and hot water in the future. This includes electrification, predominantly in the form of heat pumps, green gas in the form of hydrogen, which has the potential to decarbonise millions of homes on the existing gas grid, but is a much longer-term ambition. And heat networks, combined with low-carbon plant rooms, are great for flats and apartments and dense urban conurbations. Timing will also be critical for many homes. The longer-term plan may be either moving to a heat pump or a transition to hydrogen boiler when the gas grid transitions. In the short term, the benefits of small actions cannot be underestimated. Insulation to reduce energy usage, and ensuring that a modern high-efficiency boiler is installed and well maintained, and then using a smart load-compensating heating control will all improve the energy efficiency of the property in the short term. With a varied product portfolio and heating expertise across the different technologies, Ideal Heating is in the perfect position to work with stakeholders across the industry on this journey. So now to look specifically at what the future holds for new housing. The changes in the new build sector will be driven predominantly by Part L of the building regulations, known as the Conservation of Fuel and Power. These are the regulations that govern the energy usage and subsequent carbon emissions of new build properties. Changes to Part L will happen in two stages. The interim Part L, which was consulted on in late 2019, will be released in December 21 for implementation in June 2022. At the same time as that, a new version of SAP, which is the methodology used to calculate the energy usage and carbon emissions in properties, will also be released. The Future Home Standard, which is the following iteration of Part L, will be consulted on in 2023, released in 2024, and then implemented in 2025. So first, the interim Part L. This is seen as a stepping stone to the Future Home Standard and a move towards improving energy efficiency and reducing carbon emissions in new build homes. Interim Part L starts to future-proof properties for low-carbon heating. So even if they have fossil fuels in them initially, a move to low-carbon heating will not be too onerous in the future. The main impacts on domestic heating and hot water of the interim Part L includes a 31% reduction in carbon emissions versus the current regulations, a focus on fabric via the FEES, which are the Fabric Energy Efficiency Standards. This ensures quality fabric standards to actually minimise the amount of energy used by the house. Sizing the heating to a 55-degree flow design temperature makes a switch to low temperature heating easier in the future and is also a more efficient way to run a heating system. Minimum standards for fabric and fixed building services remove the bottom performing 20% of the market in terms of products, and tighten transitional arrangements, which are moving to a 1 year and a plot-by-plot basis, means that the regulations will be enacted faster. SAP 10.3, which will be introduced at the same time as the interim Part L, has significantly reduced carbon factors for electric, making it much more attractive to be used in new build properties. Local authorities will continue to be able to set standards potentially above the minimum building regulation standards, and we see a huge amount of ambition in many local authorities in having a carbon neutral agenda. We see a variety of technology being used to achieve the interim Part L. Some developers may choose a move to heat pumps, particularly for off-grid sites, and many will choose to utilise a high-efficiency gas boiler with additional energy efficiency measures such as wastewater heat recovery, solar PV, and flue gas heat recovery. So now the Future Home Standard. Here we'll see low carbon heating moving to all new build properties. Consulted on in 23, for release in 2024 and implementation in 2025, we know now that the Future Home Standard will see a 75 to 80% reduction in carbon emissions targets for new build properties versus where we are today with the current regulations. We know at this point there'll be a move towards heat pumps and electrification in the new build. So what about the timing for implementation? What does this look like for developers, contractors, home buyers? How soon will we actually see these changes to Part L shape how new homes are built? Here, we've mapped out an estimate of the rollout of the building regulations, taking into account that 1-year transitional arrangement following the implementation of a new version of Part L. This means that for sites with buildings notice submitted before June 2022, there is a year to start each plot and for them to be able to build to the current regulations today. So we'll see plots being built to those current regulations until late in 2023 or even early 2024. Any plots where building notice is submitted after June 22 or the building work has not started by June 2023 will then be built to the interim Part L. We're going to see houses built to that interim Part L increasing in volume from June 22 through 2023 and into 2024. We'll then see the same pattern when the Future Home Standard lands. We're assuming June 2025, but the exact date is to be confirmed. Plots with building notice submitted before June 2025 and started by June 26 will be built to the interim Part L, and then we'll see a ramp up of houses built to the Future Home Standard from June 25, but increasing through 2026 and into 2027, where we'll then see the widespread uptake of heat pumps across new build properties. So in practical terms, what does this mean for heating appliances in new build properties? Electrification is the clear pathway set for the new build in the long term, predominantly in the form of heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and some direct electric. But the path to electrification will take time to develop. For the majority, the interim Part L will see high efficiency gas boilers with additional energy efficiency measures such as wastewater heat recovery, solar PV, or flue gas heat recovery. Alongside enhanced fabric, these properties will still be very energy efficient, yet still familiar to homeowners. For the Future Home Standard, we see the arrival of heat pumps en masse to achieve the measures needed. Whether it's heat pumps in houses, heat pump water heaters in flats, or apartments with HIUs and a low carbon plant room, we'll really see this ramp up from initial trials to full-scale mass install post-2025. Ideal Heating are ready to support in this transition with a full wraparound service supporting both our low-carbon products and gas boilers, from design and specification through to technical support and to customer awareness and understanding. This transition will require a collaborative partnership approach, which we're really excited to develop. So now to look specifically at what is required for existing properties in the drive to net zero. Existing properties pose a significant challenge when it comes to decarbonisation. An Environmental Audit Committee report identified that 19 million existing homes still need to be made more energy efficient and low carbon. The same report highlighted that 80% of the buildings that will be contributing to that net zero target have already been built today, with many requiring significant retrofitting to become more energy efficient. The decarbonisation of existing properties will be driven by a combination of funding, policy and regulations. We're already seeing social housing providers starting to lead the charge with ambitious local authority targets to hit and targeted funding available, such as the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. For owner-occupied private housing, the drive is less clear, with many homeowners not realising that there may be changes required. Timely, clear policy combined with robust, accessible funding pathways are needed to drive change in these owner-occupied homes, and this will undoubtedly have a longer timeline. Whilst new build properties see electrification as the primary path forward, for existing properties, the solutions are more varied and complex. The homogeneous heating population of gas boilers that we see today is likely to diverge into a mixture of products and technologies depending on the property, timelines, funding, and the householder. Electrification, hydrogen, and low-carbon heat networks all have a role to play. In the short term, ensuring that an existing property is well insulated, has a modern high-efficiency boiler, and a load-compensating control can all make economic steps to make properties more efficient. With a varied product portfolio and heating expertise across the different technologies, Ideal Heating is in the perfect position to partner landlords, tenants, contractors, and homeowners on this journey. Thank you.